Hi everyone, I'm Barry Mitchell, and welcome to Simply Science. On this episode, we'll introduce you to a special resident of local waterways, learn the science behind sourdough bread, and just in time for summer, we'll explain sunburn. But first, COVID-19 has been central to our lives for the past few years, and it could be around a long time. Now, some researchers, assisted by some very bright high school students, are exploring what other viruses might be lurking around out there. Here's Mike Gilliam to introduce us to the next generation of virus hunters.
What we're looking for are wet bird poop. So everybody keep your eyes open.
Meet the New York City virus hunters. These junior scientists are on the front lines of virus surveillance. We caught up with them in Central Park, looking for avian diseases and wild urban birds in the era of COVID-19.
Obviously, viruses like COVID are a big part in our society. They can cause pandemics or epidemics like COVID has caused. So looking for the flu or these viruses that we're looking for in birds is very important.
This is the program's second year, and it includes 5 students and their scientist mentors. They scour the city looking for bird fecal samples, or bird poop.
Basically, we're just looking for a substance that's going to be really fresh, so it will be good to examine in the lab.
The more we know about viruses circulating in an urban area, the better it is for the wildlife and also for the humans actually living in New York City.
The samples are gathered with swabs and placed into a tube. It's not glamorous work.
Oh, I do it because I love science. I think it's really fun to be part of a project where we're examining viruses or we're looking for them. And I think the whole process that we do in the lab, breaking down the DNA and looking at the RNA, is really interesting and really intricate. And I feel like not a lot of people get these opportunities.
Once they finish their gathering, the hunt is really on. Then they head back to the lab at Mount Sinai, where they continue their research.
Oh, PCR strips. Yeah. So that's talking about.
The program is run by 3 New York City institutions: the nonprofit BIOBUS, the Kramer Laboratory at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and the Wild Bird Fund. They're pushing to get more minorities into science-related fields, and they found infected birds.
But sometimes you might see that picture on the sidewalk with the twisted neck or being a little bit erratic. So this is called Newcastle Disease. They don't feel very well and very often they die.
And birds are constantly on the move from place to place.
And if that bird is infected, they shed active viral particles or even a fecal sample, and that can actually jump from one bird to another bird.
While they are not dangerous to humans, that can spell trouble for poultry farms. It could require the killing of an entire infected flock of chickens. The students can't get enough of the science.
Knowing that I could place my mark on maybe potentially avoiding another pandemic, which may not affect us personally, but maybe wildlife in this city, it really pushed me to want to join this program.
William Kim says the program may have changed his thinking and helped to lay the groundwork for his future.
Yeah, I feel like I would probably less pursue a medical career and more into the scientific research field, because I think this program really sparked my interest in continuing this work.
And that is music to mentor Philip Meade's ears.
Ideally, I'd like them all to become scientists. That would be great.
I'm Mike Gilliam for Simply Science.
Humpback whales have become regular residents in the waters off New York and New Jersey. The problem? These same waters are some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Andrew Falzone tells us about a CUNY student whose research should provide protection for these aquatic mammals. What, high-occupancy whale lane?
Whales are here. They're not just here for one season, they're sticking around. We're getting identifications, we're learning more about them.
Samantha Smith graduated from Hunter College with her master's degree in animal behavior and conservation, and part of her studies included analyzing data about the humpback whales off Brooklyn. Diana Reiss is a world-renowned expert in cetacean cognition, which is how whales and dolphins think. She was Samantha's research supervisor and heads Hunter's Animal Behavior and Cognition Program, or ABC for short.
They had a lot of data that had been collected over the years about lunge feeding of humpbacks, but it hadn't been formally analyzed. Some of it, the locations of sightings of humpbacks had been published, but not on the locations of where lunge feeding had occurred.
The data came from the whale watching expeditions that are joint ventures between Gotham Whale and American Princess Cruises out of Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn. Paul Cisuerta is a former curator at the New York Aquarium and New England Aquarium and founded Gotham Whale.
The American Princess and our partnership with them has just been fantastic because they give us the platform to get out onto the water to make observations that would otherwise be impossible.
Gotham Whale is a real gem. It's a gem for us at the ABC program, and it's an amazing educational opportunity and training opportunity and research opportunity for our students.
Samantha's research focused on humpbacks lunge feeding off the New York Bight.
The New York Bight is the section of water between Montauk, New York, on the tip of Long Island, and Cape May, New Jersey. So it's quite a big pocket of water.
That seems like it's a very busy area for boats.
Yes, it is a concern with shipping and then whales feeding here. And then where Gotham Whale goes is the New York Bight apex. It's a smaller portion and it's closer to the port of New York, New Jersey, like right where the shipping lane areas are.
And lunge feeding increases the risk to whales. Lunge feeding is an impressive hunting technique used by large whales like humpbacks. In our waters, the humpbacks basically hunt menhaden, an oily, schooling fish that provide the whales enough energy to power their bodies, which are measured in tons, not pounds. Sometimes the whales attack from the bottom, sometimes from the side, but more often than not, the lunge leaves the whales exhausted. Bellies full, they need to take a break like a human after Thanksgiving dinner, and they linger at the surface to literally catch their breath. This combination of lunge and linger in an area filled with ships can be problematic for the boats, but deadly for the whale. Sadly, researchers and citizen scientists aboard Gotham Whale trips often observe firsthand the scars left behind when boats and humpbacks collide.
At some point in their journey, we obviously can't say whether it's in the New York Bight specifically, but at some point the whale had an incident with the boat.
I think one of the most exciting outcomes of this study was correlating the presence and locations of where lunge feeding occurred with shipping lanes.
And it's the hope of everyone involved that the information analyzed can help whales and boats coexist.
Consolidating that information into data that can be used, as Samantha did, to produce peer-reviewed publications that can be used for science and conservation.
So the shipping lanes converge to this area of precaution where boats are suggested to slow down, and all of our hotspot locations were within the precautionary areas.
And Samantha's research couldn't come at a more relevant time when COVID-related supply chain issues can often involve a backlog of ocean-faring cargo carriers, requiring government agencies to balance our needs with the ecosystems.
You know, this may be one study, but this one study then will hopefully inspire others to do more studies and will inspire us as New Yorkers and cosmopolitans to really protect them.
I'm Andrew Falzone for Simply Science.
Take one culinary arts class, add a medium-sized science professor, stir in a cup of microbiology and physics, and you've got the Lisa Beth Kovitz recipe for sourdough bread.
Jeremy Sito, City Tech professor of biology, had a problem. Hoping to keep his science students engaged during the pandemic, he asked them to build their own sourdough starters at home. But instead of getting something edible,
they would get smelly socks as opposed to a good sourdough. And that raised me to say, hey, I got to go talk to a real person that does this.
the person Jeremy needed was Chef Mark D'Alessandro of Kingsborough's Culinary Arts program.
I'm teaching a course. It's an artisan breads course, and a majority of the focus is that we're using what's called a levain. Bakers often look at as being magic, just you put two things together and it happens, which I've always had a reverence for, but I've always wanted to know more about.
And Chef D'Alessandro's class wasn't making just any sourdough. Using the levain starter, which takes wild yeast from the air, he and his Kingsborough culinary students set out to create the most New York sourdough ever.
We're hoping to truly grow a baguette in Brooklyn. So one of the neat things that we've been able to do it here at Kingsborough, we have a farm on campus, and we grew rye. If you take the flour from campus, if you take water that has been filtered through the pipes here, if you take the yeast that is out of the environment, and add just a small amount of other things to it, it's cooked on campus. It really is as local of a Kingsborough, Brooklyn, CUNY product as we can put forth.
And Jeremy, what did you want for your science class from this experience?
Since I'm a co-PI on an NSF grant, we actually want to bring what we call meta-barcoding using DNA into our classrooms. So it was a perfect opportunity for us to have samples where we can extract DNA in class, which I did with some of my advanced students, and then actually identify the types of microbes. Because once again, it's not just the yeast that we're familiar with, but all these other bacteria that are actually changing the complexity of the flavor profile and transforming that flour.
D'Alessandro's culinary students fed and cared for their Brooklyn sourdough starter for 5 days, and every day, Professor Cito's biology students extracted DNA samples.
It's really interesting to see his results because as you're doing this on a daily basis and adding new, fresh food for the yeast, he was able to tell us how that changed because the samples that he got were from each feeding throughout the 5-day process to make that culture. So it's a really rich set of data.
So what did they find in this very New York sourdough?
And one thing that was a little bit disturbing at first was it just said enterobacteria was a large portion of it. But when I start to look at it, it disappears over time. And then furthermore, when you look more closely at the actual species in there, it actually probably comes from the flour. We're getting our stuff that we want, the yeast and the bacteria that we want, the lactobacilli, that are actually creating this environment. And this goes with any type of fermentation. You always get the good bacteria there that are making it safe for you to consume.
But why did the culinary arts students get bread when the science students got smelly socks?
So the 4 stages of fermentation I have detailed here on the board. The first stage actually starts in the mixing bowl of the machine.
We didn't do any of this, but it's beautiful to see what type of artistry is behind it. And also, it's something that can translate over to science too, because we do very fine things as well, and they need to learn some of this artistry behind it as well.
Mark, thank you so much. You and your students are always so generous with your food and your knowledge, and it's always so much fun.
You're welcome to visit every time. Thank you.
This has been Lisa Bevkovitz for Simply Science.
Ah, summer, mosquito bites, grass stains, and sometimes sunburn. So splash on that SPF 30 while our Ari Goldberg explains the science behind, ouch, sunburn.
Hot town, summer in the city. Whether you're out to Jones Beach for some sand and surf or for a picnic in Central Park, chances are pretty good you just might end up with a sunburn this summer. But just what is a sunburn? Well, it turns out there's a lot more to the pain you're feeling than just, ooh, the sun's too hot. But to start, let's talk about the sun. The sun's UV rays are what can damage our skin. That's what we're trying to block when we're putting on sunscreen. The most potent of these rays is UVC, and that's almost completely blocked by the ozone layer. The least potent is UVA rays. These aren't as prone to sunburns, but are associated with aging and can increase the chances of developing cancer over time. And that leaves us with the one in the middle, UVB rays. UVB rays also increase the risk for skin cancer more directly, and also can damage cells directly. Our body does have some built-in protection here, melanin, what makes some people's skin darker than others. And what that means is when we get a tan, it's not that the sun itself is darkening our skin cells, it's that our cells are darkening themselves to help block and prevent further UVB damage. And sunburns are similar in that sense. They're less about the sun itself and more about our cells' reaction to it. So let's dive into that a bit. When UVB rays damage a skin cell's genetic machinery, what that means is that ultimately, the structure of the DNA gets changed. Now, because DNA's job is to code for how our cells function, if the structure is changed, it's not going to code right. Thankfully, the body has mechanisms to fix broken DNA, cutting out defective chunks and repairing that spot. Now the question becomes, what happens when a cell gets too damaged to be fixed? Say because you've been out in the sun all day, without sunscreen, soaking up all those UVB rays for hours on end. Well, in a worst-case scenario, the cell is damaged in a way where it starts growing out of control, as a tumor. That's the cancer risk. But normally, your body marks the cell for termination and just gets rid of this battered cell entirely, a programmed death called apoptosis. In a manner of speaking, the cell basically cuts its losses and commits suicide. Once these cells die, the immune system detects the presence of pieces of these destroyed ones, and this triggers an inflammatory response. It's the same basic mechanism our body uses for dealing with a lot of harm: trauma, bacteria, wounds. This is how our body heals itself. And only now, through that healing process, as opposed to the sun itself, is where we finally get the telltale signs of what we think of as a sunburn. The heat, swelling, and redness, that's blood vessels dilating to increase healing blood flow to the area. The pain and irritation, you can blame some of the proteins released in this process. So all those unpleasant symptoms as you scratch off that oh-so-charming layer of dead skin over the next few days, they aren't the damage from the sun, it's your body healing itself from the damage. The bad news, of course, is once the cells have been damaged to this point, no amount of aloe is going to save them, though it might make the healing process more pleasant. Unfortunately, you've just got to deal with some level of unpleasantness while your body's inflammatory response heals the area. But in the end, just because you may understand a sunburn better doesn't mean you need to get one. Make sure to wear your sunscreen this summer. For Simply Science, I'm Ari Goldberg.
Congratulations, you've earned your PhD in chemistry. Now, where do you look for a job? Well, there are places you may not have thought of that require just such a foundation. This is a story about the unexpected places a PhD in chemistry can take you.
Now wash day's dream for your curls. It's not a dream anymore.
My name is Nassim Farahman. I'm a recent graduate in PhD in chemistry from grad center CUNY, and now I'm a senior scientist in the largest cosmetic company in the world, L'Oreal.
Nassim Farahman, an international story of talent, risk, and perseverance.
I was born and raised in Tehran, Iran. Since I was in school, I always liked science and mathematics, and basically in Iran, if you're a good student, you end up going to science and engineering. And considering my interest and my performance, I ended up going to one of the top 5 universities in Tehran, studying chemical engineering.
At home, Nassim's family speaks Farsi.
I used to go to English classes since I was in elementary school. And, as international students, when you want to continue your education in US, you have to pass the English exam.
Armed with a proficiency in English and a BA in Chemical Engineering from Iran University of Science and Technology, Nassim makes the difficult decision to leave her family and friends to pursue her graduate degrees in America.
You know, we all knew that U.S. has the best universities and academic institutions. So I was lucky to get accepted to Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville,
where she gets her master's, but the PhD would have to wait. After a year-and-a-half detour to help care for her ailing dad back in Iran, Nassim sets her sights on the Big Apple and the doctoral program at the CUNY Grad Center. She studies in the research lab of Professor Stephen O'Brien.
You know, in chemistry department, like, if you ask anyone about Professor O'Brien, they all say, like, he's a really nice man, he's very supportive, and I'm so happy that I had the chance to be one of his students.
Tell me how you got the job at L'Oreal.
When I was, like, doing my the write-up for my thesis, I sometimes look at some of the open positions on LinkedIn, and I noticed these job openings in L'Oreal, and the position was for senior scientist in hair fiber discovery domain. So I applied to the job, and I got good feedback from them, and I finished writing up, and I defended my dissertation in September 2021, and I started my job in October 2021. I also would like to encourage all the students, especially women, to follow their dreams, take risks, don't be shy, and take the opportunities. Especially in CUNY, in New York City, there's tons of opportunities, networking, educated and interesting people that you can have in your network, and that's going to help you.
And Nassim even networked her way into marriage.
We used to go to the same undergrad school back in Tehran, but we didn't know each other at that time. When I came to New York City to study my PhD, he was also in PhD program in civil engineering in CUNY.
Introduce us to your husband.
Sure, just a second.
Well, welcome to our new show, CUNY Love Connection. So you traveled 6,000 miles just to meet the girl next door?
Yes, I came all the way here to CUNY.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Sure. Best of luck to both of you. They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Why? Let's ask our own CUNY nutritionist, Stacia Helfand.
Today I'm really excited to talk to you about breakfast, the most important meal of the day. I can't tell you, and it's totally normal, but how many teenagers, adolescents, young adults come to me, even adults, saying that they're just not hungry for breakfast, they're not interested in it, their appetite suppressed in the morning. Some of that's hormonal, some of it's totally normal, totally natural, but for me it's like a big siren going off saying that your metabolism isn't working. You should wake up ready to eat within about an hour of waking. When you go to bed at night, your body goes into resting metabolic mode, and it doesn't really wake up until you have your first meal or snack of the day. So it is a problem if you don't eat until 12 or 1 or 2, your first meal of the day, because if you wake up at 7 or 8, your body is working in this resting metabolic state. It's not as alive, it's not as active and efficient as it would be if you'd stopped to have a little something within an hour of waking up, is what I say. It can be very small, and then a little meal or snack every few hours after that to stabilize your blood sugar, keep your metabolism firing. Research is so good here. Breakfast research is phenomenal and conclusive. People who eat breakfast have better brain and cognitive functioning, they have more energy, they have better moods, they make better food choices, not just at breakfast, but throughout the rest of the day. People who eat breakfast tend to maintain a lower weight and have better immune systems. It does not have to be big. People are constantly asking me about intermittent fasting, and what we find is that the more people sort of restrict and say, I'm not gonna eat and I have to hold back, the more they're tempted to eat more at their meals and snacks and overdo it later in the day than they otherwise would if they ate more small, frequent meals throughout the day. And some of my favorite breakfasts are things like oatmeal with chia seeds, a diced apple or raisins and some cinnamon, eggs and avocado and berries, 2% yogurt with a little bit of granola and some melon. And then if you're really on the go, I have no problem with a piece of fruit or a little homemade trail mix. My breakfast tip for today:
That's our show. A quick reminder to please check us out on social media. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Barry Mitchell. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time on Simply Science.